I used to think that family was the one place where truth mattered most. Then my cousin taught me otherwise. She taught me that some people will burn your entire world down to feel the warmth of the flames. But what she never counted on was that from those ashes, I would rise with receipts, records, and a revenge served so cold it would give her frostbite. My name is Megan Brooks. This is the story of how I discovered my cousin's lifelong web of lies and how I made sure the truth became her undoing. Phoenix summers are brutal, but nothing compares to the heat that consumed my family that June. I was 25, married to my college sweetheart James for 3 years, and finally pregnant after months of trying. The day I found out, I clutched that positive test in my bathroom, tears streaming down my face, overwhelmed with a joy I had never known before. "James," I called out, my voice cracking. He came running, thinking something was wrong. When I showed him the test, his eyes widened, then filled with tears. He lifted me off the ground, spinning me around in our small bathroom. "We're going to be parents," he whispered against my hair. "We're going to be parents." We decided to announce it at my grandmother's 80th birthday party that weekend. The whole family would be there, my parents, my brother, and of course, my cousin Vanessa. Vanessa and I grew up together, more like sisters than cousins. She was the wild one, always getting into trouble, while I was the responsible one who cleaned up her mess. Despite our differences, we were close. At least, I thought we were. The party was at my grandmother's house, a charming bungalow filled with decades of family memories. Photo albums lined the bookshelves, documenting every milestone, every Christmas, and every graduation. The smell of her famous apple pie filled the air as family members mingled in the living room. I squeezed James's hand, my heart racing, as we prepared to share our news. My grandmother had blown out her candles when James clinked his glass with a fork. "Everyone, Megan and I have an announcement to make," he said, his voice steady, but his hand trembling in mine. The room quieted. My mother's eyes were already glistening, as if she somehow knew what was coming. "We're pregnant," I said, my voice breaking with emotion. "Due in January." The room erupted in cheers and congratulations. My mother rushed over, enveloping me in a tight hug. My father clapped James on the back. My grandmother wiped tears from her eyes. But Vanessa stood frozen by the window, her champagne glass suspended halfway to her lips. Our eyes met across the room, and something in her expression made my stomach drop. It wasn't surprise or joy. It was a calculation. I should have known then that something was wrong. I should have seen the storm brewing behind her smile when she finally approached to hug me. "Congratulations, Meg," she whispered, her voice lacking any emotion. "What a coincidence." Before I could ask what she meant, she pulled away and clinked her glass again, silencing the room. "Since we're sharing news," Vanessa announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room, "I might as well share mine too." My grandmother frowned slightly, setting down her cake fork. "I'm pregnant too," Vanessa said, her hand moving to her still flat stomach. 12 weeks along. More cheers erupted, though slightly more subdued. Vanessa had been single for years, bouncing between relationships that never seemed to last. No one wanted to ask the obvious question. My mother, ever tactful, finally did. "That's wonderful, honey. Who's the lucky father?" The room went silent. Vanessa's eyes locked with mine, and I felt a chill run down my spine before she even spoke. "James is," she said simply. The world stopped. The cake in my mouth turned to ash. James's hand, still holding mine, went limp. "What?" he choked out. "That's impossible." Vanessa's smile never wavered. "Remember that night in March? When was Megan visiting her parents in Tucson? You came over to help me with my leaking sink." One thing led to another. "That never happened," James said, his voice rising. "I fixed your sink and left, that's it." My mother gasped. My father stood up, his face reddening. My grandmother watched silently, her eyes moving between us all. "I have proof," Vanessa said calmly, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a folded paper. "DNA results. I had a CVS test done. The baby is James's." She handed the paper to my mother, who unfolded it with shaking hands. I watched as my mother's face crumpled, and I knew in that moment that my perfect life was shattering around me. James was on his feet now, his voice desperate. "Megan, you have to believe me. This is insane, I've never touched her. But the damage was done. The looks on my family's faces, doubt, pity, anger, told me everything. In the space of 5 minutes, my pregnancy announcement had been overshadowed by the worst betrayal imaginable. I ran from the room, locking myself in my grandmother's bathroom, where I vomited up birthday cake and the remnants of my happiness. Through the door, I could hear the chaos: James's continued denials, my father's threats, and Vanessa's calm responses. When I finally emerged, the party was over. Only my grandmother remained in the living room, sitting in her rocking chair, an old photo album open on her lap. "Come here, child," she said in a gentle voice. I sat at her feet, my head on her knee like I used to do as a little girl. Her weathered hand stroked my hair. "Things are not always as they appear," she murmured. "Remember that." I didn't understand what she meant then. I was too consumed by pain, by betrayal, by the impossible choice before me: believe my husband or believe my cousin. The next few weeks were a blur. James moved into our spare bedroom at my insistence. He swore his innocence daily, begged me to believe him, and offered to take any test. But Vanessa had those damning DNA results, and my family had already convicted him. Why would she lie about something like this? My mother asked when I called her, my voice hoarse from crying. What would she have to gain? I didn't know. That was the question that kept me awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my hand on my growing belly, wondering how something so precious could come into the world surrounded by such ugliness. Then came the day that changed everything. I was cleaning out our home office, considering whether I should be packing James's things, when I found it, a manila envelope hidden behind the filing cabinet. Inside was a copy of the DNA results Vanessa had shown everyone, but this copy had notes in the margins, calculations, and what appeared to be instructions for altering the document. My hands shook as I studied it. I'm not a scientist, but even I could see that something was off. The numbers didn't add up. The letterhead looked slightly wrong, pixelated in places. That night, I confronted James with what I had found. "I didn't put that there," he said, studying the document. "But this proves what I've been saying. She faked the results, Megan. I never touched her. I would never do that to you." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to. But years of cleaning up after Vanessa's mess had taught me caution. "I need more proof," I said. "If she faked this, there must be evidence." The next day, I called my grandmother and asked if I could come look through her old photo albums. I claimed it was for a pregnancy scrapbook I was making, but really, I was searching for something, anything, that might help me understand what was happening. What I found changed everything. "Hey everyone, it's Megan here. I know this story is getting intense, and trust me, it only gets more twisted from here. If you're feeling this emotional roller coaster so far, please hit that like button. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever caught someone in a massive lie? What did you do?" Okay, back to how I discovered my cousin's web of deceit. My grandmother's house smelled like cinnamon and old books. She welcomed me with a tight hug. Her tiny frame was somehow still strong enough to make me feel safe. "The albums are where they've always been," she said, gesturing to the bookshelf. "Take your time." I started with the most recent ones, working my way backward through family Christmases, Thanksgivings, and birthdays. Nothing seemed unusual until I reached an album from about 15 years ago. In the margins next to a photo of Vanessa with her arm in a cast, my grandmother had written in her neat script. Claimed she fell from her bike. Jumped off the garage roof on a dare. I frowned, flipping to another page. Next to a photo of Vanessa crying at her sweet 16, said no one came because they all got food poisoning. Sent out the wrong date on invitations. Page after page, photo after photo, my grandmother had documented Vanessa's lies. Small ones, big ones, elaborate stories she'd told to gain sympathy or avoid trouble. It was like reading the footnotes to my childhood, discovering that so many moments I remembered had been built on fabrications. "Grandma," I called, my voice unsteady. "Can you come here for a minute?" She shuffled in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. When she saw which album I was looking at, something flickered across her face, recognition, then resignation. "You found my notes," she said simply. "Why did you write all this down?" She sat beside me on the couch, her arthritic fingers tracing the writing in the margins. When Vanessa was little, after her mother died, she started telling stories. Little lies at first, saying she had done her homework when she hadn't, claiming she had brushed her teeth. Normal child things, my grandmother sighed. But they grew. The stories became more elaborate and more manipulative. I started documenting them because I thought someday she might need help, professional help. Did she ever get it? Your aunt refused, said I was exaggerating, that Vanessa was creative. She shook her head. By the time Vanessa was a teenager, the lying was compulsive. She couldn't stop, and worse, she didn't want to. She discovered that lies gave her power, attention, control. I flipped through more pages, finding more annotations. Did anyone else know about this? Your mother suspected, but Vanessa was always careful to make her biggest lies believable, and she was clever about who she targeted. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? She chooses her victims carefully, people who trust easily, people who have something she wants. My grandmother's eyes met mine. People like you, Megan. The realization hit me like a physical blow. You don't believe her about James, do you? I've watched that girl lie for 20 years, my grandmother said firmly. And I've watched James love you for 7. No, I don't believe her, but proving it, she shrugged. That's another matter. I left my grandmother's house with 3 photo albums and a new sense of purpose. If Vanessa had been lying her entire life, there would be patterns, evidence, people who knew the truth. I started with the DNA results. I took them to a friend who worked in a medical lab, asking her to look them over. These are fake, she confirmed after studying them. The formatting is wrong, the markers aren't labeled correctly, and this signature, she pointed to the doctor's name, that's not how lab reports are signed. This was made to look scientific to someone who doesn't know better. Next, I dug into Vanessa's pregnancy timeline. She claimed to be 12 weeks along when she made her announcement, which would put conception in March, when James supposedly fixed her sink. But when I checked our calendar, James had helped her in February. The dates didn't match. I called Vanessa's ex-boyfriend, a guy named Ryan she'd dated briefly earlier that year. He was hesitant to talk at first, but when I explained the situation, he opened up. We were still hooking up in March, he admitted. Not dating, but sleeping together. She never mentioned being pregnant when we stopped seeing each other in April. This is the first I'm hearing of it. Piece by piece, I built my case. I discovered that Vanessa had used similar tactics before, claiming a professor had made a pass at her when she failed a class, accusing a former roommate of stealing when she couldn't make rent. Each time, she had played the victim masterfully, using others' sympathy to get what she wanted. But what did she want now? Why target James? Why destroy my marriage? The answer came from an unexpected source. My brother called me one evening, his voice low. Meg, there's something you should know, he said. I overheard Vanessa talking to her friend at the gym yesterday. She didn't see me. I was around the corner. She was laughing about how she's going to get James to leave you and move in with her. She said something about how she's always wanted what you have, and now she's finally going to get it. The pieces clicked into place. Vanessa had always been jealous of my relationship with James. From the beginning, she'd flirted with him and made comments about how lucky I was. I'd brushed it off as harmless, but it wasn't. It never had been. There's more, my brother continued. She's not even pregnant, Meg. She was joking about wearing a fake belly to family events. By the time anyone realizes there's no baby, it'll be too late. She'll have James, your house, everything. I felt sick, but also strangely calm. The fog of confusion and hurt was lifting, replaced by a cold clarity. Vanessa had nearly destroyed my life with her lies. She turned my family against my husband and made me doubt the father of my child, all because of her twisted jealousy. That night, I finally let James move back into our bedroom. I showed him everything I'd found, the annotated photo albums, the fake DNA results, and the timeline discrepancies. He held me as I cried, both of us grieving for the weeks we'd lost to Vanessa's manipulation. What do we do now? He asked, his hand protectively covering my growing belly. We get more proof, I said, and then we end this for good. The next phase of my investigation took me deeper into Vanessa's past. I talked to old teachers who recalled her elaborate excuses. I also spoke with former friends burned by her lies. There was even an ex-fiancé who ended their wedding after finding out she faked a terminal illness for attention. Each conversation reinforced what I already knew. Vanessa was a pathological liar who had spent her entire life manipulating others. And now, she had set her sights on destroying my marriage and stealing my husband. But I still needed irrefutable proof, something that would convince my family beyond any doubt. Something that would expose Vanessa so thoroughly that she could never hurt anyone again. I found it in the most unlikely place, my grandmother's attic. While helping her sort through old boxes, I discovered a journal that belonged to Vanessa's mother, my aunt, who had died when Vanessa was 8. The journal detailed her concerns about her daughter's storytelling and her worries that something wasn't right with the way Vanessa manipulated situations, even as a small child. There was also a letter from a child psychologist recommending therapy for Vanessa's compulsive lying and manipulative behaviors. My aunt had been concerned enough to seek help, but she died before Vanessa could begin treatment. Armed with this history and all the evidence I'd gathered, I was almost ready to confront Vanessa. But I needed one final piece, proof that she wasn't pregnant. That came in the form of medical records. Not Vanessa's, those would be private, but the records of the doctor whose name she'd forged on the fake DNA results. I tracked down the real Dr. Melissa Chen, who confirmed she had never treated Vanessa Brooks and certainly had never performed a CVS test on her. She was horrified that her name had been used on falsified medical documents and offered to provide a statement saying so. 5 weeks after Vanessa's bombshell announcement, I was ready. I had built an airtight case that would expose her lies, not just about James, but about her entire life. I had statements, documents, photographs, and witnesses. I had the truth. What I didn't have was a plan for how to use it. "You could just confront her privately," James suggested one night as we lay in bed, his hand tracing patterns on my now visible baby bump. "Show her what you know, tell her to come clean, or you'll do it for her." I considered it. A private confrontation would be less messy and would spare my family the public drama. But something in me rebelled at the thought. "No," I said finally. "She didn't just lie to me, she lied to everyone. She turned my parents against you. She made my father look at you like you were dirt. She needs to be exposed to everyone." "How do you want to do it?" James asked. I thought about it for a long moment, the same way she started this, at a family gathering. My grandmother's birthday was in June. Now it is August, and my parents' anniversary is approaching. They planned a small dinner party at their house. It's for immediate family, which sadly includes Vanessa. It would be the perfect opportunity. Everyone who needed to hear the truth would be there. Everyone who had been deceived would witness the revelation. As the day approached, I prepared meticulously. I organized my evidence, practiced what I would say, and steeled myself for the confrontation. James worried that the stress wasn't good for the baby, but I assured him that nothing would be better for our child than clearing his father's name. The night before the anniversary dinner, I sat alone in our nursery, a room we'd only recently started preparing again after weeks of uncertainty. I ran my hands over the crib we'd assembled, the tiny clothes we'd bought, and the stuffed animals waiting for our child. "I'm doing this for you," I whispered to my unborn baby, "so you'll never have to doubt who your father is, so you'll grow up knowing that the truth matters." I felt a flutter in response, the first movements I'd felt. It was as if my child were permitting me, encouraging me to fight for our family. The next evening, dressed in a flowing maternity dress that accentuated my growing belly, I arrived at my parents' house with James beside me and a folder of evidence in my purse. My heart pounded as we walked up the familiar driveway, but my resolve was firm. My mother greeted us at the door, her smile stiff when she saw James. My father barely acknowledged him. Vanessa was already there, wearing a loose dress with what I now knew was a fake pregnancy bump underneath. She smirked when she saw us, confident in her deception. "Megan," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "you're getting so big already, I'm barely showing." She patted her fabricated bump. I smiled tightly. We all grow at different rates. Dinner was excruciating. My parents had an awkward conversation, carefully avoiding any mention of babies or the future. My grandmother watched everything with knowing eyes, occasionally squeezing my hand under the table for support. James endured the cold shoulders and sidelong glances with quiet dignity. When my father brought out dessert and champagne and sparkling cider for the pregnant women, I knew it was time. As he prepared to toast his anniversary, I stood up. "Dad, before you make your toast, there's something I need to say." My voice was surprisingly steady, something that everyone needs to hear. The table fell silent. 5 pairs of eyes turned to me, my parents confused, my grandmother's supportive, James's nervous, and Vanessa's suddenly wary. I took a deep breath and began. 2 months ago, in this family, a lie was told, I said, my voice clear and strong. A lie so devastating that it nearly destroyed my marriage. A lie that turned this family against an innocent man. A lie told by someone we all trusted. Vanessa's face hardened. "Megan, if you're going to rehash all this." "I'm not rehashing anything," I cut her off. "I'm revealing the truth, and I have proof." I opened my folder and laid out the first piece of evidence. The falsified DNA results with my notes showing the inconsistencies. "These results that Vanessa presented are fake," I said, pushing them toward my parents. "The doctor whose name appears on them has signed a statement confirming that she never treated Vanessa and never performed any such test." My mother gasped. My father frowned, picking up the paper. "That's ridiculous," Vanessa snapped. "She's lying to protect her husband." "Am I?" I pulled out more documents. The timeline showed James was at her apartment in February, not March. There were statements from her ex-boyfriend, confirming they were still together when she said she conceived with James. Lastly, I had the letter from the child psychologist, diagnosing her with compulsive lying as a child. "This is a pattern, Vanessa, a lifelong pattern of lies." I turned to my grandmother. "Grandma knew. She has been documenting your lies for years." I placed the photo albums on the table, open to pages with my grandmother's annotations. Vanessa's face flushed red. "This is insane. You're all going to believe her over me, after what her husband did." "James did nothing," I said firmly. "Except refuse your advances. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You wanted him and he rejected you, so you decided to take him from me." "That's not." "My brother overheard you at the gym, Vanessa, bragging about how you're not even pregnant. How are you wearing a fake bump?" I stepped closer to her. "Show them. Show everyone what's under that dress." Vanessa backed away, her hands protectively covering her stomach. "I don't have to prove anything to you." "You do," my grandmother said, speaking for the first time. "You've torn this family apart with your accusations. If you're pregnant, prove it." All eyes were on Vanessa now. She looked around wildly, like a cornered animal. "This is harassment," she hissed. "I'm leaving." She tried to push past me, but I stood my ground. Running away, that's what liars do when they're caught. Something snapped in her then. The careful mask she'd worn crumbled, revealing the ugly truth beneath. "Fine," she shouted. "You want the truth?" "Yes," I lied. "James never touched me. He wouldn't, no matter how much I tried. Always so faithful to perfect little Megan." The room went silent. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father stood frozen, the champagne bottle still in his hand. "I'm not pregnant," Vanessa continued, her voice rising hysterically. "But I should be the one having his baby. I should be the one with the perfect husband and the perfect life. I've watched you get everything handed to you while I got nothing." She yanked up her dress, revealing a prosthetic pregnancy bump strapped to her flat stomach. She ripped it off and threw it across the room. "Happy now?" she screamed. "You've got your proof." The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. No one spoke. We all stared at the discarded fake bump on my mother's dining room floor. Finally, my father set down the champagne bottle with a heavy thud. "Vanessa," he said, his voice tight with anger, "I think you should leave." "Uncle David." "Now," he said, pointing to the door, "get out of my house." Vanessa looked around desperately, seeking an ally, finding none. Her gaze landed on me, and the hatred in her eyes was palpable. "This isn't over," she whispered. "Yes, it is," I replied calmly. "Because if you ever come near my family again, I'll share everything I've found with everyone we know. Your boss, your friends, your dates. Everyone will know exactly who you are." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. In the silence that followed, my father turned to James. "Son," he said, his voice breaking, "I owe you an apology." James nodded, accepting the olive branch. My mother began to cry, coming around the table to embrace us both. "I'm so sorry we doubted you," she sobbed. "Can you ever forgive us?" "There's nothing to forgive," James said gently. "She fooled everyone." My grandmother caught my eye across the table and gave me a small, proud smile. She had known all along, known that I would find the truth, that I would fight for my family. Later that night, as James and I drove home in peaceful silence, I felt my baby move again, stronger this time, a definitive kick. "She's celebrating," I said, placing James's hand on my belly. He asked, smiling. "Just a feeling." As we pulled into our driveway, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Vanessa sat behind the wheel, watching our house, watching us. Our eyes met through the windshield, and I felt no fear, only pity. She had lost everything tonight, her credibility, her place in the family, and her power. I placed my hand protectively over my belly and stared back at her until she finally started her car and drove away. I knew she might try again someday, might craft new lies and seek new revenge, but I would be ready. I had found my strength in uncovering her deception, and I would never let anyone threaten my family again. The next morning, I woke to texts from my parents, both apologizing again and both asking how they could make things right. I told them the same thing I had told James: there was nothing to forgive. We had all been victims of Vanessa's manipulation. Over the following weeks, our family began to heal. James and my father rebuilt their relationship, bonding over preparations for the baby. My mother threw herself into planning a proper baby shower. My grandmother shared more of her annotated albums with me, and together we laughed and cried over the years of deception we had all endured. Vanessa disappeared from our lives. I heard through mutual friends that she had moved to another state and started over somewhere new. Part of me hoped she would get help and find a way to live without lies, but a larger part of me was simply relieved she was gone. As my due date approached, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal had been painful, the investigation exhausting, and the confrontation terrifying. But through it all, I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed: the strength to stand up for the truth, to protect what was mine, and to expose deception no matter how convincing it might seem. In January, as predicted, our daughter was born, 7 pounds, 6 ounces of perfection with James's eyes and my stubborn chin. We named her Verity, meaning truth, a constant reminder of what we had fought for, what we had won. As I held her in the hospital, James sleeping in the chair beside us, I whispered to her the lesson I had learned, the wisdom I hoped to pass on. The truth isn't always easy, little one. Sometimes it hides beneath years of lies, sometimes you have to dig for it, fight for it. But in the end, the truth is all that matters. The truth is what sets us free. Vanessa thought her lies would give her my life. Instead, the truth became her undoing and my salvation. Hey everyone, it's Megan again. Thank you so much for staying with me through this wild journey. If my story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button to hear more true stories of family secrets, betrayal, and justice. And remember, sometimes the most important family you have is the one you choose to protect, no matter what. Until next time, this is Megan Brooks signing off.